This analysis has been sitting in my to-do pile for a couple of months now, and there's a reason for it. Every time I come back to Crimson One, I find something new about it. I constantly rewrite the thing until I've decided that it's good enough, and then after I've done that, I come and rewrite it again. So in this one, I'm just going to do what I have. Quick note about this one is going to involve a lot of theorizing about it, because the info we get on Crimson One is a little limited within Project Wingman, and yeah, it's basically going to be a lot of theorizing and explanation of why he ends up what he's doing. So we'll start with Crimson One before the events of Project Wingman. He is considered to be the top ace in the world by many sources. He serves as the model fighter pilot for what the Pacific Federation aspires for in their pilots, and leads an elite squadron of peacekeepers, which is designed to lock down a country by the air, and is loyal to the Federation over their own country. So how did he get by this? We don't know much. This is all the info we're given in-game. However, there is a common theory that he played the role of a player character in what was the Oceanian War. Quick lore thing about Project Wingman: 15 years before the conflict that the game centers around, there was a mercenary cabal that tried to establish an independent state in Oceania, what is today Australia. The Federation crushed it, and that is one of the main driving factors of the game. What do I mean by the player character? Well, he essentially serves the role of the ace of aces in that one. This point of him being the player character will be important later on in the analysis.
Crimson Squadron's on station. Rex, is this them? The mercenaries? Affirmative. Drive these mercenaries out of the airspace, Crimson One. Roger, tally-ho. Let's chase these dogs off.
So, after the Cascadian conflict commences, Crimson Squadron and Crimson One are deployed to Cascadia to perform their role, lock down the air, subjugate the Air Force, and allow the Federation to regain their control. They're tasked with many tasks, but while on one sortie, towards the end of it, they're given a radio message saying that a priority target has been identified over the Yellowstone exclusion zone. That is Monarch, the player character, and his squadron. This would be the first encounter between Crimson Team and Monarch, and there are two possible endings to this encounter depending on what the player chooses to do. The game says to you that you are supposed to run away and engagement is not advised due to, at that point in the game, during your first playthrough, you'll probably be in a ground attack aircraft. Because that's the thing all these games do, is they throw ace battles into ground attack missions, because they just love doing that, don't they? If the player turns to fight instead, which is what most people do in their second and third playthroughs when they've started unlocking the experimental jets, Crimson will note the skill during the dogfight and how if he's turned towards them, he's a bloodthirsty dog. Crimson will be forced to run after the first plane is quote-unquote destroyed, however the member canonically survives that encounter. This would be the start of a downward spiral for Crimson. So now we get to Crimson's obsession with Monarch. After this encounter, he becomes obsessed with the mercenary. He's seen the skill and the threat he poses to Federation air and ground assets, so he starts to warn others about it. Most of them dismiss it, as noted in the Mission 9 when they say, "Why should we pay attention to them?" when they're warning with Crimson about Monarch taking the mercenaries that the rebels hired seriously. The others would eventually come around to his point of view, specifically by the time that they start to see what Monarch can truly do in missions 7, 8, and 9, and 10. His allies just call him obsessed because he lost to a mercenary, and that is what's motivating him. His pride has been damaged. He wants to kill that guy. Crimson's want to get taken more seriously. Wow, I repeated myself a lot. Yes. Now we get to the level that everyone loves in Project Wingman, Cold War. This is key. This is the turning point of the entire story of the game, because this is where the entire air war basically gets decided.
Crimson Squadron, ready the MLRAs. We're putting an end to this party. Looks like it's those mercenaries. Think they might turn tail and run again? Not this time. Open fire.
This is Monarch and Crimson's second fight in Bering Strait. So, during the fight, Crimson starts talking about how Monarch is standing in the way of world peace, and when ordered to retreat by his command, he argues with it. He says, "Don't take this away from me, just keep sending reinforcements." It's starting to hear that we see the detrimental effects that the obsession with Monarch is having on Crimson. This is also a key point because in this fight, Crimson Squadron members go down for the count. And this also has a negative effect on Crimson's performance. What do I mean by that? Well, it's sort of similar to the thing that Yellow Squadron had. Later in the Continental War in Ace Combat 4, Yellow Squadron started rotating pilots out. Yellow 13 was the only one who was permanent, and thus they lost a lot of their combat effectiveness because they had to deal with new pilots. It's similar with Crimson. By this point, Crimson and his 7 other squadron mates would have been a cohesive unit. They would have been able to read each other's reactions, trust each other. Now they've got new pilots coming in, and they've lost a lot of that cohesion because of those new pilots. But anyway, Bering Strait results in a rebel victory and the full recognition of Monarch as a force to be reckoned with. He has single-handedly turned the air war. Now we get to Prospero. After Bering Strait, the Federation deteriorates their situation in Cascadia. Lots of important places fall. Their prototype program gets uncovered, and yeah, basically it's all going well, horribly. The key point in this phase of the war is the attack on Prospero. Prospero is the second largest city in Cascadia and the key trade hub for the world. The rebels want to take it because if they take it, they can prove that the Federation can't defend the world's interest. It all goes well. Monarch and Hitman team gain air superiority until something happens. The head of all Fed peacekeepers in Cascadia orders cordium nukes to be dropped on Prospero. This is a significant escalation, think. And for those of us who played or heard of Ace Combat 0, there's echoes of Stage of Apocalypse here with the nuking of their own territory. However, this goes well beyond Stage of Apocalypse. They nuke the city so hard that they cause the reaction of all the cordium underground in the city. They cause the ring of fire to ignite. They start the calamity again. The calamity being the world apocalypse. So in a sense, because they were losing, they started the second apocalypse. You know you're insane when you make the Belkan actions justified. Crimson One's thoughts on the incidents are unknown, but what is known is that he pins the blame on Monarch and the other mercenaries, and in a certain point of view, he's right. I mean, if Monarch hadn't been there, then the nuking wouldn't have happened, and all that stuff could have been avoided in the later parts of the game. Keynote is Crimson One didn't himself authorize it. He did not authorize the Prospero attack, despite the head of Federation. This is the head of all peacekeeper forces. Now, it's easy to confuse that with Crimson, since he's the head of Crimson Squadron, which is a peacekeeper squadron. So it's not Crimson, it's his overall head. Months pass, and then the rebels decide they want to take Prospero back. They send in ground units, and after Hitman's cleaned up the area, they get a new thing.
Unsurprising. They always return to the scene of the crime. Tally-ho on 3 bandits. It has to be him. Of course it is. Looks like it's Crimson. Hitman team, engage. I have units in the area aren't in a position to help you out. I'm sorry. Crimson Squadron, engage. Avenge this land.
Crimson Squadron has returned. They want to finish off Monarch once and for all. Quick musical side note, because goddamn do I love Project Wingman's OST. There's 3 separate themes of the Peacekeeper Squadron, and then there's one for Crimson One and Monarch. I will talk about Crimson One and Monarchs later, but I'll do the Peacekeeper Squadrons now. We first heard Peacekeeper 1, and in the intro cutscene for Yellowstone Exclusion Zone battle, we heard Peacekeeper 1 with Intro A. In Intro A, we have Crimson's little thing repeated over and over, a sense of foreboding dread as this elite squadron comes to crush you. The Bearing Strait has Peacekeeper 1 with Intro B. Intro B has a little less of that foreboding. It seems like you can actually take these guys on and win. You don't fear them as much as you did over Yellowstone. And then, for the Prospero battle, we have Peacekeeper 2. Peacekeeper 2 is a masterpiece. Every time I listen to the soundtrack, I keep coming back to Peacekeeper 2, and the contrast between it and 1 is great. In 1, it's a threatening tone, but it still sounds like cohesive. In 2, you lose a lot of that cohesion, representing the degraded mental state of Crimson 1, and, by extension, his squadron, who are basically fanatically loyal to him at this point. Crimson and the others engage, with Crimson starting to rant about how his squadron is in the right and how Monarch has made this war personal. His ranting gets to the point that we have one of the greatest exchanges in the game between Diplomat, Hitman 2, and Crimson.
Just think, how many of you killed? God, just shut up! How dare! Shut up! Nobody asked! You think we asked specifically to fight you? You think I care so much to keep fighting you? You're wild dogs, of course. Shut up! Just shut up! Fight us! Don't talk! I don't care! Shut up! Positive tone. Dip's radio transceiver is off.
I love that exchange. It personifies all that the players are probably feeling about Crimson right now. They really are getting tired of his rants, they're tired of his delusions, and they just want it to do. Crimson loses the battle, he's shot down, and he is presumed to have died, with Stardust, your liaison with the Cascadian Independence Force, the rebels, saying that it's a waste of a pilot for him to go out like that. Next, we get to the final battle. Presidia, the capital that we watched fall in Mission 5 and we're now taking back in Mission 20. Crimson 1 isn't at the battle, which is odd because you think the Federation would send him there. It's probably he's recovering from Prospero or maybe he was dead. But he eventually returns. He's stolen the prototype that we see in missions 13 and 14. No, wait, 12 and 13, I'm an idiot. He steals that prototype, the Project Wingman Mark 1, roll credits, and he's basically decided that his mind at this point is that Monarch represents a threat to the security of the Federation of the world. He needs to engage Monarch to neutralize that threat. After a ceasefire is announced, Crimson breaks it 10 seconds afterwards, which is a new record for running down the Geneva checklist. He drops cordium nukes on Presidia. Similar to what happened with Prospero, but he doesn't ignite the Ring of Fire this time, but he detonates enough cordium to basically make a mini calamity. And finally, he reveals.
You're a slave to history. Even after calamity, you fight against the only order that can guarantee the safety of your people. You solely are responsible for this.
Crimson uses every weapon in his arsenal to try and kill Monarch. All the while, his rants get even more and more insane. He's blaming Monarch. He reveals that he's actually a native of Cascadia, and that he's used this as this home, and that if Monarch never came along, he wouldn't have lost all that he has. And, again, from his point of view at this point, okay, let's summarize Crimson's point of view. Crimson has a deep view that the Federation is the only way that things can get better for the world post-Calamity. He even said this: Calamity erased mankind once, a chance to start again. He views the Federation as the ultimate pinnacle of humanity, that if you stray from the Federation, that you're dooming yourself to a terrible life in the post-Calamity era. Or AC. Yeah, that's it, AC, after Calamity. To him, Monarch has Monarch has driven Cascadia off this path, and his nuking of Presidia is basically what he views as a mercy kill. It's better for them to die than to suffer through the life outside the Federation. And so he wants to kill Monarch to try and prevent any other nation from suffering that fate. He doesn't see the Federation's evils. Again, theorizing here, if he was the player character in the Oceanian War, then he maybe is holding on to this nostalgic view of what the Federation once was, because the Federation in the Oceanian War were the good guys. He's holding on to this view, unwilling to recognize that the status quo has changed, that the Federation has drifted from what it once was, and that it's better for Cascadia to go its own way. His rantings progress from trying to blame it on Monarch to just an acceptance of what he has done. He's saying, kill me and see what happens to this world, and he says, either way, your life ends today. And then, Monarch deals the death blow. Crimson is defeated. There's 3 phases to his fight. The first 3 phases are with Kings, the theme that we heard the last 2 slides. Kings, again, I love the soundtrack. Jose Pavli blew it out of the park with this one. Basically, Kings has several repeating parts. It's the Crimson and Monarch's theme, because it's both of their leitmotifs playing over and over. You hear it, it's the conflict between them over Presidia. And then we get to Coronation. I just want to give you a little experience of what it was like for me, a first-time player, to finally get to Coronation. My entire mood flipped with Crimson. Like, you go from hating Crimson to feeling genuinely sorry about him. You feel like he deserves better. You feel like this world could have been better. He could have deserved better. The best way I've seen it is he's like Soleimani from Joint Assault. He goes down this path. He is totally responsible for his fate. But in the end, you kind of did make him... You kind of feel a sense of, guilt. Like, what could this man have been without him? And then, at the end of Coronation, we hear his final message to Monarch.
Monarch, will you hear the thunder? When the storm comes for you, remember me.
Again, this message is open for interpretation in a lot of ways, but I have one view on it. It's a warning. What do I mean by this? Well, think about it. If Crimson was the player character, then Crimson got usurped by Monarch. But then will Monarch get usurped by someone? The storm and the thunder that he references is not, literal. It's not him saying, don't forget me. Well, not in the literal sense. He's saying, don't become like me. He's regained some of his sanity, and he's basically recognized what he does, and he doesn't want that to happen again. He warns Monarch that eventually someone will fill the Monarch role, and he'll have to play Crimson 1, and he warns him, don't do what I did, don't scramble for power with every weapon, don't destroy your home country. After that, Crimson detonates in an orange fireball, and a nice little bit of game design here is that he will purposely fly his PW Mark 1 away from Presidia before detonating. It's almost as if he doesn't want any more deaths. He's already caused enough. Why cause another? Crimson isn't that sympathetic. He doesn't fulfill the Ace Combat antagonist, your sympathy. You hate him during Kings. You hate him. You want to see him burn. And then, during Coronation, sure, he regains some of that sympathy. But he serves as an example of the dangers of obsession. He becomes so focused on Monarch. He becomes totally obsessed that he's willing to do everything. And seeing what's done to Presidia is an example of that. He's also a sort of reverse Pixie in a way, whereas Pixie fought for the abolition of borders, he fights for keeping borders. Whereas Pixie fails to launch his V2, he lands it. He's a combination of a lot of characters. We see Pixie, we see Pasternak in that he defies his country. We see... what was I going to say? we see sort of the Belka Greyman from Ace Combat 5 in his wounded pride being the source of all his hatred. But overall, he's just the great counterpart. He's the antagonist role. And as Jose Pavle put it in his explaining video when he was mentioning the two complementary ostinatos that represent Monarch and Crimson, there's no Crimson without Monarch, and there's no Monarch without Crimson.